Welcome to the mingle, folks. Okay, I guess we get to edit this like everything else. Oh, okay, it's live. So, all right. So if you're out there watching this, we're glad you're here. Now, Jake, if people come in and they watch this live, do we see them on this? They pop up. Okay. Okay. Good. Gotcha. Okay. Well, my name is Vaughn Cook. I am a candidate for the U.S. Congress in Utah's 4th Congressional District. I am a member of the United Utah Party, and I'm the candidate for that party. United Utah is a third party here in Utah. It is we organized it about 7 years ago, so it's been around a while. It's a fairly good sized third party, and I don't want to dwell on that too much. Let me just continue with the introduction to me. I grew up in Utah. My roots here go back 4 generations. My great-great-grandfather was a contemporary of the early, well, he was one of the early Mormon pioneers. And on my mother's side, I go back a couple of generations there because they immigrated from Sweden. And so I was raised in Utah. I graduated from Skyview High School up in Smithfield, Utah State University in Logan. I have an acupuncture degree from a school in Hawaii and a doctor of Oriental medicine degree from a school in New Mexico. I own a software company, and we build software that brings Eastern and Western medicine principles into software applications. We have customers all over the world, and in the course of building that company, I've traveled all over the world. So I have a lot of friends here and there and a lot of experience with different cultures and languages. And over those years, I've come to appreciate the richness that diversity brings to our lives. It's not important that we're all the same color. It's not important that we all think the same. It's not important that we all eat the same food. It's that diversity that creates an opportunity for each of us to expand our horizons, learn to perceive life in a different way, appreciate the different approaches to things like spirituality and politics. And that is I think one of the things that I enjoy about life is just the diversity. That having been said, I'm grateful that I live in Utah. I'm grateful that my wife and I live in Mapleton. We have been married for 52 years. And we have 5 kids, 17 grandkids, and a couple of great-grandkids, and another great-grandchild on the way. My undergraduate degree is in political science, and I have been politically active my entire life. And the reason that I am running for Congress is because I want to be the congressman for the 4th District. I think I will do a better job representing the people of the 4th District than we have received over the last few years. One of the problems that exists in Washington, in my opinion, is that politics is captured by 2 major political parties. And in Congress, there are 429 voting members. You always hear about the party wanting to control the House. They call Congress the House. And in order to control the House, you have to have the majority of the seats in the House. So if you take 429, divide it by 2, in order to have a majority, you have to have at least 215 Congress people who belong to your party. Right now, the Republicans, they hold the control. They have 217 voting members in Congress. The Democrats have 212. So they have a slight majority. And I don't know if you've been following the news, but Mike Johnson, who is the Speaker of the House, is trying to pass a budget. And they haven't been able to pass the budget because there are holdouts in the Republican Party. In order to pass the budget, he has to have 215 Republican congresspeople vote for the budget. And as Congress is working right now, no Democrat is going to vote for that budget. They don't want to see they don't want to see the Republicans win, and passing the budget is seen as a win. And so Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, and his leadership team are out coercing Congress people and making deals and trying to negotiate, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's a situation where there should be more input than just the Republicans. And what happens is this. If you look at politics and you draw politics in America on a horizontal line, in the middle is where democracy exists, and that's where the moderates live. So to the right of that center line, we would draw the Republican Party, and to the left, we would draw the Democratic Party. That's what they say, the right and the left. That's where that comes from. The further right you get on that scale, the more radical the ideology of those Congress people becomes. And when Mike Johnson, the Speaker, has to have basically every Republican in Congress vote for the budget or he can't pass it, he has to pander to everybody, including those people who are the most extremely ideological. Now, the same is true with the Democrats. You know, if the Democrats want to do anything, they have to have everybody behind them. But the problem is, even if they get everybody, they still can't do anything because the Republicans control the House. One of the reasons that I'm running for Congress is because I believe we would be better served if we pushed both political parties into a minority position. And we filled the space in between the two with independent or third-party moderate candidates. So let's take today's reality and see what that would look like. Let's assume that I get elected to Congress. I would replace a Republican. And so the Republican seats would go from 217 to 216 if everything else remained the same. They would be within 1 point of the majority. Now, let's say that somewhere else in America, another third party or independent moderate gets elected to Congress. And let's say the Democrats stay at 212 and we take another Republican seat and another Republican seat and another Republican seat. So now you've got 4 or 5 people, independent, sitting in the middle, and you have neither political party in a majority position. What that does is it means those parties could get all of their members to vote one way or the other, and they couldn't pass legislation. And what that does is it forces the power into the middle position. And so it's not these extreme ideologues who are holding government hostage. It's the middle moderates who hold the power. And it does a couple of things. The first thing it does is if someone wants to pass legislation, they have to reach outside of their party. And if you have to reach outside of your party, could you reach to these middle moderates who are not affiliated with with any party? Yeah, you could. But could you also reach into the other political party, into the Democrats or the Republicans, into their moderates and say, hey, here's some legislation that we think appeals to moderates, and you now get agreement across party lines. There are a lot of moderate Democrats and there's a lot of moderate Republicans who think more alike than the extreme Democrats or the extreme Republicans. And when you are appealing to a moderate mentality, that's where you get common sense legislation. So you might say, well, what is a moderate? You know, is a moderate somebody who just doesn't have an opinion about anything? You know, they just sit around and don't want anything, so they get everything? And the answer to that is no. A moderate is someone who is more inclined to listen to people who are speaking differently than they are, or who perceive the problems different than they do, or who feel that solutions to the problems are better achieved through some way that maybe you hadn't thought of. That's what a moderate is. A moderate is someone who is less inclined to get caught up in an ideology. A moderate is someone who will not hero worship. We see a lot of that in Washington, where we think that somebody is going to save us from whatever, and it becomes a little bit ridiculous. A moderate is someone who is willing to compromise, and someone to whom compromise is not a dirty word. To walk into the room and think you're the smartest person there is a form of arrogance that I think moderates tend not to have. And we get our best government when we get a collaborative solution. So I'm a moderate, and that's really what a moderate means to me. And I think that's why we would be better served if we moved the power in Congress to the middle instead of to the extreme edges. And if we moved the Republican and the Democratic Party into a minority position so that cross-party compromise and cross-party cooperation was mandatory. The other thing that happens in Congress is the political parties hold representatives hostage. One of the reasons that you want to affiliate with a party as a candidate is because it's your pathway to the ballot. Because I am a candidate for the United Utah Party, which is a recognized party in Utah, and because I am their selected candidate, it means I will be on the ballot in November. Now, there are other ways for me to have gotten on the ballot in November, but it's a fairly easy path if you're affiliated with a political party. The two major parties, the Republicans and the Democrats, have over the years become an incredible machine. And they raise a lot of money. They give candidates a lot of money. The campaign finance laws in this country are screwed up enough that if you want to give a particular candidate a lot of money, you can accomplish that through a political party. You cannot accomplish it by giving the money directly to the candidate. And so it means that political parties have undue influence on representatives. So pretend for a minute that you're a Republican and you're in Congress, and you think that some legislation that's being presented by the Democrats really is pretty good legislation, and you would like to vote for it. Well, if you vote for it, that's basically putting a gun to your own head and killing your political career, because the Republican Party does not want you to give the Democrats any power in the next election cycle. And if the world sees the Democrats passing legislation and you're helping them do it, you're just shooting the Republican Party in the foot, and they say, hey, if you're going to do that, you can't play the game with us. We're going to kick you out of the party. But there are a lot of people, I believe, in Congress who cooperate. And I think there probably is a lot of cooperation that happens in Congress. I don't want you to think that it never happens or that I think it never happens. But it doesn't happen often enough. And the other thing that it leads to these forever problems that never get solved. One of those is immigration. We have immigration proposals that have actually come before Congress in this year, and they were shot down, particularly by Donald Trump, because he didn't want to see Joe Biden get any credit for solving immigration problems. And so he told the Republicans, scuttle that bill, and they did. It happens all the way around, but it's a power grab, and we need to move past the power. We need to let representatives represent, and we need them to represent us, the people who elect them, not the political party whose ticket they happen to be running on. So one way we can do that is to start the momentum here in the 4th Congressional District. We have an opportunity to elect someone who fits that, and that's me, and I'm hoping that if you live in this district, you'll vote for me. I would like to be your congressman, and that's kind of the lay of the land as I see it. I don't know if anybody has any questions, and I don't want to just sit here and babble on. So raise your hand if you have a question. There's an icon on your app. Dave, I see you've got your hand up. And you'll need to unmute.
Yeah, so I'm unmuted.
Okay.
Can
we
you
can
hear me?
you.
Okay, yeah. So just wondering about, what's recently happening in Utah politics, how, looking at like the Republican legislature, their desire to, make an amendment to the Constitution, looking at kind of the Republicans controlling everything in Utah. How does that work as well? Is there a tie between the national federal politics back to Utah politics? Does the U.S. congressman have any influence or input on that, or are those two kind of separate issues, state politics versus our representatives in Washington?
Well, there is a separation. However, Utah's kind of I don't know if it's a unique animal because I'm not sure what politics is like in a lot of other states. But we are a red state, and we have a Republican Party that has controlled all three, the executive, the legislative, and judicial appointments. They've controlled, and the Attorney General's office, which is part of that. They've controlled that for almost 40 years. And to the credit of the Republican Party, I will tell you that the reason that happens in Utah is because over the last 50 plus years, the Republican Party has done a good job of convincing voters in this state that Republican is a synonym for righteous. And if you don't know a candidate, your safest bet is to vote for the guy with the R by his name. And so people go into the booth, and most voters don't know all the candidates. And you vote based on name recognition as a biggie. And you vote on this, okay, I guess I'll vote for the Republican because they're probably the more righteous of the candidates. The problem with that now for us as citizens in this state is the Republican Party has a supermajority in the legislature. That means that they have a veto-proof group of Republican legislators. If they pass legislation, the governor can't even veto it if they don't want him to. So we've moved the power almost exclusively into the legislature. You've probably heard that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. What we are seeing, I believe, in Utah is absolute corruption. Now, let's talk about what's happened just recently. In 2018, there was a bill passed in Utah that it was a voter initiative. So it was a piece of it was essentially a piece of legislation that voters put on the ballot, and then voters in the state approved it. They voted for it. And what they wanted an independent redistricting commission to draw the lines for the political boundaries in the state. That's something that happens every 10 years when they do a new census. That passed. And so they organized this independent, the redistricting commission, and they went to work. And they came up with some boundaries. They came up with a recommendation. They made that recommendation to the legislature. The legislature completely disregarded anything they suggested, and the legislature drew the boundaries the way they wanted to. They basically thumbed their nose at all the voters and said, screw you guys, we're going to draw these boundaries however we want, no matter what you think or no matter what you've told us to do through this initiative. Well, when that happened, then there was a group of people who were irritated enough that they filed a lawsuit, and that lawsuit took several years to get through the courts. And earlier this year, the Supreme Court issued a unanimous decision that said, legislature, you were wrong. You can't do this. The legislature said, are you kidding me? We can do anything we want because we have a supermajority. And we've been in this position for so many years. Who's going to question us? And so they called an emergency session and they they approved a new amendment. It's called Amendment D. They want voters to vote on that in the election this year. And what Amendment D does is it makes it legal for them to do what the Supreme Court has told them is currently illegal. So they're changing the law to be able to do whatever they want. And the problem is they then went out and misrepresented what they were doing to the public. When you see the ballot on November 5th, you will see that the wording for Amendment D is, if you don't know what's going on, you'll be snookered by it. It's completely deceptive. They say, hey, would you like to have an amendment that gives the voters more power? Well, Amendment D does not do that. Amendment D takes power away from the people. And so this same group of people recently went back to court and they sued the legislature and said, you can't do this. And a judge in the 3rd District said, that's correct. Legislature, you can't do this. You haven't done it right. Well, the legislature is now appealing that to the Supreme Court, and in a few days, the Supreme Court will hear this case and they will make the ultimate decision whether Amendment D and the language proposed can be on the ballot and be on the ballot with effect, or whether it will be on the ballot with no effect. Now, that's a long way to a lot of background that I hope doesn't bore you. But the thing we need to do in Utah is we need to push the Republican Party into a minority position. And we don't need the Democrats to take the majority position. That'll never happen in Utah. But what we need to happen in Utah is we need independent and third-party representatives in our state government. And we need Republicans. But if the Republicans or the Democrats or any other party has the majority, and if they have the supermajority, we're going to get the same kind of baloney that we're getting now. Now, I'm not saying, and I don't want you to think that I'm disparaging our legislators. My experience in government, and I've known a lot of legislators and political elected officials over the years. I have the highest respect for them because they're hardworking, they're well-intended, they're smart people, they're underappreciated, and they do a good job for the most part. And frankly, I think that the legislators we have today fit in that same category. But the problem isn't the individual. The problem is the system. If you take a good person and put them in a corrupt system, you're going to get corrupt outcome, and you're actually going to corrupt the individual. And so to change in Utah's government these dysfunctions, we don't have to disparage the individuals. We only have to change the system. And voters can do that. And the way you do it is to elect non-Republicans. So what I would encourage everybody in Utah to do is look at the people who are running that you can vote for, get to know them on more than just a name recognition basis, and vote for the person who you feel is best suited for the job. And if you see a person who is a Republican and a non-Republican who is evenly matched, for sure vote for the non-Republican, because we need fewer Republicans in government in Utah. That would make our democracy in this state more democratic, and we would not see silly legislation like we see too often. That was a long answer, Dave. Sophia, I see your hand up. Can you hear me? Can I hear you?
Yes.
Oh, there, I can hear you.
I think there was somebody else's hand raised first.
Was
I'm
there?
happy to wait. Mhm.
Oh, we'll get him. Okay. I've got Jake on the controls, so he's the boss. Pardon me for jumping in.
Mhm.
Okay,
Would
Sophia,
you
go
like?
ahead though. We got you here.
Great. I'm just curious. You talk about like congressional cooperation. And so I'm wondering if you could give an example of what more congressional cooperation would result in, say, on the issue of either immigration or affordable housing or something of that nature.
Let me um, let me talk about campaign finance reform. Can I?
Sure. I'm
Okay.
just curious how you see more congressional cooperation. Like, what does that look like to you, and what might that result in
Right.
or create for us as a benefit in terms of citizens of America and of Utah?
One of the challenges that we have with government is there has become a very fuzzy and a very corrupt line between private industry and government. We have um, we have too much private money influencing government in ways that is not in the best interest of the citizens of the country. And that is reflected, I think, in the way campaigns are financed. So let me back up a minute. Well, let me just say this. Let's assume that we get Congress in a position where there is no political party with the majority. And so it requires cross-party negotiation and cooperation to get things done. What I would expect happen is we would then see more common sense solutions. And when someone says we need to reform the way campaigns are financed, we would have more representatives who would say, I agree, let's proceed. And we would, if we could get a solution to that problem, then we would see a cascade of other problems solved almost automatically. Right now, if I want to donate $10 million to the Republican Party, I can do it in a heartbeat. Or the Democratic Party, I can do it in a heartbeat. There's no restriction on how much money I can give those parties. The parties then have a certain amount of discretion how that money can be spent to get their representatives elected. If we made it impossible for private money to influence elections in this way, we would take away a lot of the incentive for political party influence in politics. And if we did that, we then would get more common sense solutions to things like immigration, to things like reproductive health, to things like affordable housing, to things like pollution, to things like health and chronic illness in this country, farming policies. So there would be a whole cascade of common sense solutions and these problems that never get solved because right now those problems raise too much money. I mean, the abortion issue, I think, is an example. You got people on one side who are screaming at the people on the other side and vice versa. And I think the argument is more about mobilizing voters, keeping them angry, keeping them engaged, and keeping them sending money in because they can't, you don't want the other side to win or you're going to lose. And it's those kinds of activities that take place in a polarized environment. And the way the system is built, there is no incentive to break that polarization. The way to change that is you have to change the system. And the system can be changed by the voters if they don't send more Democrats and more Republicans to represent them in Washington. Let's send Democrats, non-Republicans, and we'll open up that gap and we'll start to get these common sense solutions. I don't know if that answered it, Sophia, but that's my rant on that.
Yeah, thanks. But it also sounds like, I think I kind of hear you saying politics is a form of business in a way, and that
Well,
there's a financial benefit to it. So, and so you're proposing to adjust the policies that have turned it into more of a business?
yeah, let me give you an example. National Institutes of Health. I believe that's a division of the Food and Drug Administration. If it's not, it's associated very closely. Those regulatory bodies are supposed to be looking out for the best interests of the American people. However, the Food and Drug Administration gets most of its funding from the industries that it regulates. And most drugs that are approved by the Food and Drug Administration are developed by scientists who work for NIH, the National Institutes of Health. Those drugs are then licensed to drug companies, and the scientists who invented them get a royalty. So now you've got this conflict of interest where the FDA is approving drugs invented by the NIH, who are acting, and that whole organization is acting like a subsidiary for drug companies. Now, when you get that kind of a relationship going, do you think the FDA or CDC or NIH, do you think those guys are interested in the sale of drugs? Absolutely, because they make royalties on it. You know, Upton Sinclair said, it's difficult to convince a person of an idea if understanding that idea is going to diminish their salary. And that is so true. I mean, if you tell me that I'm wrong and being wrong means I'm going to make less money, I'm going to have a hard time understanding what you're talking about. The system is not going to correct itself because it has built itself, it has evolved into a dysfunctional machine. Now, I don't mean it doesn't function. What I mean is it doesn't really do what we want it to do as citizens. If we want an FDA, if we want an NIH, the government should pay for it, period. If it's important to the citizens should pay for it. And we shouldn't tap private industry to make up the difference. By tapping private industry, in the case of the FDA, they're tapping the drug companies and they're tapping the medical equipment manufacturers, and those companies are paying in to support the FDA. I think that should stop. I think if we want an FDA, we should pay for it as citizens. They should not represent anybody but us. And if they're going to regulate drug makers, and if they're going to drug other medical things, they should do it on our behalf, not on behalf of the people who are putting the money into the coffers where their paychecks come from. So those kinds of problems exist all throughout government. And it's those kinds of problems that will not get solved if we continue to send Republicans and Democrats to Washington to represent us, because all we're doing is putting good people into a dysfunctional machine and we're turning them into cogs in the wheel. Am I passionate about that or what?
Thanks. It's great.
Jacob.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you great. Can you hear me okay? Oh, we must have lost you.
Now?
Oh, there you are. You're back. Welcome.
Okay. Sorry. Sometimes mobile's a little bit weird for me. Yeah, so, I can tell you're really passionate about a lot of issues. You answered my first question on Amendment D. So it sounds like it will probably be on the ballot depending on how Supreme Court votes.
Well, my guess is the ballots have been printed, and yes, it'll probably be there. The Supreme Court, if they say you can put it there, then if you vote for it, it'll matter. If they say you can't put it there, you can still vote for it, but it won't matter.
Okay. So it's still important to let people know not to vote for Amendment D.
Yeah, vote no for Amendment D. It's just, it's bad
Unless you like
legislation.
Amendment D, you're
Pardon?
super in. Unless you like Amendment D, you're super into political elite, decision making.
Yeah, no, even if you're happy with it, don't vote for it.
Nice. My second question, I've actually phone banked for United Utah Party. I think that's a wonderful thing. How are we going to win your election? Like, what's your go-to strategy? I mean, it is hard to flip a seat, and I want to know more.
Well, the odds are not in my favor. Okay, I'll start with that. And I'm not in this race delusional. Is there a path to victory? Yes, there is. 50% of the registered voters in the 4th District are Republicans. 37% are independent or third party. And 13% are Democrats. There are 4 candidates in this race. Burgess Owens is the Republican. He is the incumbent. And he is the elephant in the room, no pun intended. He's the guy who's going to be tough to beat. There is a Democrat, and there's an independent, and there's me. If all of the independents voted for me, that would give me 37% of the vote. If all of the Democrats voted for the Democrat, then that would give her 13% of the vote. That'll leave 50% less. And if I can whittle into some of those Republicans who might be more moderate in their thinking or might be interested in a change in Congress in the district, with about 39% of the vote, it would be conceivable that I could win. So it is possible. It's not beyond the realm of possibility. The other reason I think that 50% of the people in this district are registered Republicans is because in Utah, you can't vote in the Republican primary unless you are a registered Republican. So a lot of people just register as Republicans so they can vote in the primary. Now, why would they do that? It's because 81% of the election in this state is determined in the Republican primary because we just elect Republicans. And so if I want to vote for somebody, if I want my vote to actually matter, then the rationale is I need to be a Republican so I can vote in the Republican primary. A case in point is John Curtis is the Republican candidate for the U.S. Senate this year, and he'll win. He'll be our next senator. There's just no question. So does it matter who you vote for Senate in the final election here? No, it doesn't make any difference at all, because John's going to win. Now I don't have any problem with that. I know John; he's a good man, but that's just the way politics are. So a lot of the people, I think, in the 4th District who are Republicans only for the purpose of voting in the primary. And it doesn't mean that they're going to vote for a Republican in November. And I'm hoping that enough of those people will vote for me. If I could get to that 39% and the rest of the votes, pan out, I could win. But that's a long shot, and I recognize that. And I am not running for office against anyone. I'm not running because I'm dissatisfied with the representation we have. I'm running because the system in Washington needs fixing. And the only way to fix it, in my opinion, is to send non-Republicans and non-Democrats. So I'm the option this year. So make sure you tell everybody that, Jacob. I think you're muted. I see your lips moving, but I can't hear you.
I'm talking now. If you can hear me.
There we go. Hear you now.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So yeah, I'm not sure if you're doing anything different from other campaigns like Ammon or that. But is like the from here to there just canvassing that likely voter base? Is it canvassing, independents and Republican base? Or are you doing some events? I mean, you're down to the last 40 to 50 days, right?
Yeah. Well,
What's the
we're
engine?
we're doing all of those things on a limited budget.
Okay.
When I went into this, I said I'm not going to go in debt. My campaign is primarily funded by me. We've raised a fair amount of money, but I continue to put money in, and I will continue to do that. So we don't have unlimited funds, and so the things we have done, we've tried to be in creative ways stretch the dollars as far as we can. So we've got signs. We're going after name recognition. We're using social media. We're talking people when we get an opportunity to talk to them, and things like this. And it's an interesting path. If you don't enjoy politics and you don't enjoy the process, you would burn out running for office really fast. I can tell you that, because it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of work. I tell people it's like starting your own business, and it really is. If you're a candidate, you are the product, and you have to go through all of the same steps with that product that you go through with any product if you're starting your own company. And starting your own company is a grind. I mean, it just takes a lot of work, and it's risky, and the odds are against you. But if you're passionate about what you're doing, it's exhilarating. And that's how politics is. Now, I don't know what it would be like if I had $2 million in the bank. It would probably be a little bit different journey, and I'd have more staff, and we'd be spending more money on advertising. But hey, I've started my own business on shoestrings in the past, and this is kind of a campaign on shoestrings.
Well, congratulations for making it this far, and here's to winning in November.
Hey, thanks. It would be awesome. It'd be awesome.
Yeah, we need people like you. So great.
Marilyn, press the hand icon on your app. Or click on it. Jacob's going to tell you how. Okay. Oh, there you are. Marilyn's got her hand up, and here she is.
Fix this.
Thanks for participating.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm thrilled to
There
be
you
here.
are.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm wondering, does Utah have a high percentage of people who vote who are registered? Are they voting people, or do they kind of don't vote?
It depends on the election. This is there's two kinds of elections, the presidential year, and then they have the off-year election, it's called. In an off year, there are fewer who vote. This year, I expect we'll have 80% of the registered voters who will vote. Primarily
and that seems like quite a
because
bit.
it's a lot. Yeah, we actually have a high percentage turnout generally. This year, because of the race between Trump and Kamala, I think there's going to be a lot of people who, they're going to be emotionally engaged, and they're going to come out just so they can vote for those two. And that brings them out to vote for everybody else too.
Well, I have another question. Do you anticipate that there's going to be trouble at the voting polls, or because Utah is mostly Republican, do you think it'll kind of bypass Utah?
No, we have a very organized, well-administered voting process in this state. Everybody votes by mail. You can
Really?
vote by mail. So everybody gets a ballot, and you can either mail it back, or you can go in, or you can vote in person if you want to. This is not a swing state. And so
Mhm.
we don't get the controversy that, for example, they're getting down in Florida.
Uh-huh.
Uh, Trump is going to win this state. That there's it's going to happen because
Uh-huh.
there's enough Republicans and people who don't want Kamala that they're going to vote for Trump, and he'll be the presidential nominee from here. But
Mhm.
but I think for the most part, my experience being up close with poll workers and with county clerks who administer the voting process, it's respectful, and we don't look at each other with suspicion or derision or anger.
Uh-huh.
We know that the women behind the table at the voting booth, they're my neighbors. I know them, so
Yeah.
I'm not
Uh-huh.
gonna call them crooks. And
Mhm.
that's kind of, I think, a feeling that permeates throughout the whole state.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad to hear that.
And and that's really, I think, true up and down government in Utah. Yes, there are problems with it. Yes, there are frustrations. Yes, we have this absolute majority that is, corrupt, in my opinion. But I have, my legislator is a neighbor. I know him personally,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
I respect him. And, I'm not going to vote for him if there's a better choice who's not a Republican. But he's not a bad person. It's the system that's the issue. It's not the people. We need to change the system so that the people function like common sense people, and it's not,
Right.
they don't operate just to maintain power. They operate for the good of the people. So, but I think we all
Okay.
believe that in Utah for the most part.
Uh-huh.
We love each other.
That's good. I'm happy about that. I
And if
hope you win.
hey, thanks, Marilyn. I hope I do too. But if I don't, I'm having fun. So,
Well, that's good.
yeah.
It's a refreshing voice that you offer.
Oh, good. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
I think we don't have any more questions. I think I pontificated enough. So let's wrap it up. I want to say thanks to everybody who joined us tonight, and thanks to anybody who might watch this after the fact. And if you don't live in the 4th District, be sure to talk to your friends who do and tell them to vote for Vaughn Cook. Thanks and good night. Okay, so we're done.